Welcome everybody to this panel. My name's Jack Boreham. I'm the lead editor at the Metaverse Insider. We have a very exciting panel today, a question that is near and dear to everyone's hearts, one that is obviously quite contentious as well, and we're discussing where the metaverse is at and where it's going into the future. It's probably a question that you've debated amongst your fellow colleagues, and it's one that we seek to answer today. So over to you, Tamid. My first question is, where do we see the metaverse, and how does it relate to other kind of emerging technology sectors, like, for example, quantum, or, for example, even the space industry? Like, how are you seeing differences in where the metaverse is growing and how other industries are also growing?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed for that question. Firstly, apologies to everyone, I can't be there in person, but it's a pleasure to still be a part of this panel. So in terms of kind of my role, just to give a quick bit of background, I work at City Global Insights, and I look at kind of innovation and technology as a whole, and as you mentioned, compare it to other areas of innovation, such as to do with space and quantum computing. I think the metaverse is a really interesting one, just because of the variations there are in defining it, firstly. But I think if we look at it, on a quantitative perspective, there's a few different angles that come to mind. I think one of the surprise takeaways comparing it to other areas of innovation is that there's actually been quite a lot of new idea generation. So one of the tasks I was given earlier this year was to look at how patent filings in the space had varied. And long story short, it had grown considerably in the years leading up to 2020, which is, I guess, really when the notion of the metaverse took hold in the public consciousness. Another angle we also looked at was historically looking at kind of private investment, and that's something that's growing considerably. So just a bit of background there. I think 2022 saw, I'd say, around a 30% decline in overall kind of VC investment, and that's across sectors and across industries, whereas actually the metaverse saw quite, I'd say almost a doubling in investment there. So I think the metaverse has still got, some room to grow, but it is showing signs of strength so far.
Thank you, Tamid. And I think on the question of VC investment, it's one that everyone has probably questioned, like how much money is being invested in the metaverse space. Are we seeing significant investments since before the hype cycle, before the Web3 hype cycle? How is it going? I think, Fabio, from your perspective, how are we seeing investment and investment from venture capital firms? Has it rapidly kind of increased over the last couple of years, or are we seeing a sort of downward trend? And how would you compare that to previously, before the hype cycle?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me today. As a quick background, we are an emerging venture capital firm. We invest, advise in the metaverse. We need to define the metaverse, and that will be an interesting conversation. But basically, that's for us the next generation of the internet or the cyberspace, and we have with different pillars. In terms of the macros, I think we've just had a good introduction. From what we see on the ground, there is clearly a slowdown, especially around the Web3, the decentralization space. Having said that, what we see is a lot of founders are now building, so it might be quiet, or it might be a false quiet on the investment front or on the release front, but everything will, or most of the things will come out in the next year, 18 months, where the first products will come out. Having said that, we already see some investments in the different moving parts of the metaverse, be it AI, obviously, be it virtual reality in healthcare or education. So the seeds are there. We see some great use cases already happening. But what is the metaverse? I mean, in some ways, it is already here. In some others, it's still a prescription, or very conceptual, it seems.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because I think one of the key things that the conference wants to achieve is, how do we define the metaverse, right? Do we separate into industrial, social, and enterprise segments? For example, that's what Siemens has recently done with their industrial metaverse white paper, and it does beg that question, and it's one that I think is critical to the establishment of the metaverse as well. Like, we need a definition that works for everyone. Is that something you would agree with, Fabio?
Yes and no, to be honest. We'll see what the metaverse will evolve. For us, it's still very poetic. It's still a true north. It's a destination. We want to move away from the big tech and how they use and own our data. And the internet as it is today has to change. It will evolve. There is an element of immersion, yes. But there's also an element of decentralization, taking back some control, and also some ownership and some economic rewards, which we don't have today with Meta, or the creator economy is growing. We need to allow ownership of IP and its reward. So there is some way there, and as a VC and as an operator in the space, we're sponsoring, we're backing initiative projects, that will give us a healthier, fairer cyberspace, if you want to call it like that, if you don't want to call it metaverse anymore.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think another key element of that sandbox space is community building. Right, we've seen Web3 projects like the Sandbox, Decentraland really kind of harness their communities using the blockchain to build valuable products, at least before the hype cycle and then after. Kazbek, from your point of view, how have you seen community change from, say, before the metaverse hype cycle to where we are now? And do you think community plays just as a vital role in building the metaverse?
Yeah. So if I have additional couple of minutes, I will go back to defining the metaverse, because I love to do that. Yeah. So the very nature, the very history of the word metaverse is similar to the destiny of the word metaphysics, like by Aristotle. So it has the same root, metaverse, metaphysics. Yeah. So everyone knows the word metaphysics, yeah, but so nobody knows exactly what metaphysics is. And it's the similar story that the book named Metaphysics, the book of Aristotle, was named not by himself, but by other scholar who gave this name to the book because it stood in the library after the book named Physics. So there's something after physics. The same mistake, I think so, just my humble opinion, that there is some mistake with the metaverse understanding, because, of course, are you sure? Because I hear myself. Do you hear me well, yeah? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So, metaverse in general, it's something like utopia, yeah? It's a dream of new economy. There were Atlantis, there were United States, not United States, America, 500 years ago, yeah? It was like new place to start building new economy, not just economical opportunities, yeah. So new world. The best definition for it is this, yeah. And this word was coined by Neil Stephenson, as we all know. I spoke to him, thanks Economist magazine, at last Metaverse Summit last year. Thanks a lot, and we discussed it. And we brought together the definition with Neil Stephenson, poetic one. He's a writer, and it should sound like a medieval definition of what ideal sphere is, of what God is. Metaverse is the sphere, the center of which is everywhere. That is like everyone is in the center of the metaverse, and the circumference of which is nowhere. So that means it has no border. Yeah. So, and it's going to be new economy, not based upon so-called bad money. Bad money is an economical term when governments print money and bring inflation. It's going to be based, in our humble opinion, on blockchain, on new decentralization, economical laws, and so on. And that brings us the conclusion that community first, that community is more important than marketing, than just marketing, yeah, than governments, than legal side, than IPs. So we don't exclude that stuff, yeah, but we should start with community. Yeah. So and we see that one of the mistakes with this metaverse hype was that 90% of investment of this hype was launched with Meta's rebranding, Facebook rebranding. Yeah, so I'm sure that Facebook or Mark Zuckerberg they did this move not because they wanted to be decentralized or they wanted to be closer to community. Before that, they tried to launch their own cryptocurrency and then metaverse. Yeah, they just want to catch up, yeah, with the reality. So decentralization first, community first, and the role of fashion isn't just decorative role, yeah? So we do what we call self-fashioning, because whatever your avatar, persona, character in metaverse will be, it will be never ever naked. It will be never ever nude, yeah? So to establish your IDs or your characters, avatars in the metaverse, you should use fashion, but in wider term. Yeah? So that's what we do, and we are one of the biggest, maybe the biggest community in the metaverse fashion. We have 27,000 of subscriptions and members just on LinkedIn. Well, LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is, it's provable, yeah, it's reliable. It's not just Telegram or Twitch. Yeah, so that's what we do, and we have a lot of things to propose. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, Kazbek, what you said about decentralization is key, right? There is an element of a metaverse that may be decentralized, but whether or not it has to be is another matter, right? So I think, Elizabeth, from your point of view, just from like an ethical standpoint, when we're talking about terms like decentralization, say a new economy, an increased virtualization of the digital world, like how important is it that ethical regulations and standards are made so that whatever the metaverse may be is safe?
So extremely. It's extremely important that we think about these issues up front as these technologies are being built. And I think from a legal, regulatory, and ethical and safety perspective, it's really important to recognize how early we are in this process, right? That this is the concept of the metaverse is just kind of at the ground floor right now. There are kind of early inklings of it, and maybe, things like gaming in digital worlds and these more immersive devices, wearables that are tracking us, or even smart city technology, things like that can be indicators that we're moving in a direction of building this metaverse. But as we do that, and our identities and everything becomes intricately intertwined here, really having set standards for privacy, safety, and that goes beyond thinking about just the data being collected and the normal use cases of it. But what are the worst case scenarios when we're collecting this data and when we're entering these environments and the issues that can come up? We really have to think about what especially from an ethical standpoint, where could this lead us as a society, and then really try to take it in the direction that we want to go. What is the future that we want? Not necessarily a dystopian future where we're controlled by the metaverse. That is the case in a lot of science fiction movies, but we want a future where we are in control somewhat of our, definitely of our personas and our identities, but we want a future, hopefully, where we're in control somewhat of who has access to data on us, where and when we can be tracked in society, how to actually unplug from those mechanisms. And so from an ethical standpoint, there are just endless questions that come up in this arena.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, Joe, from your point of view, I think Kazbek mentioned this, the importance of a decentralized metaverse, right? And another aspect of the metaverse, and arguably one of the key drivers in growth, is gaming, right? We see Fortnite, we see Roblox, we see Sandbox, whether or not they have centralized currencies, whether or not they don't. How important is gaming in building the metaverse, and what will a metaverse look like from your point of view, do you think? Because it's interesting, because gaming's gone through an evolution since its conception, right? And we're now at a point where people really can live out the lives they want to in these virtual worlds. But what you're not seeing is mainstream, say, gamers and publishers and developers adopt, say, decentralized technologies, and you're seeing a little bit of resistance. So I'm curious to hear your input.
Yeah, I think it's like a big part of what we do at Solsten. We sit at the frontier of understanding what it means to be human. So we're psychological AI. We work with most of the big game development companies, EA, Activision, Epic. These are all our customers. So as we're talking, we're understanding hundreds of millions of people psychologically. And I think, if we think of the metaverse, it hasn't existed yet, and it still hasn't existed. So if we think of the tech infrastructure, as it's Kozubek, right?
Yep.
As Kozubek was saying, it's this idea that's out there. I think really if you look at things like the Sandbox, for example, I think they had 100 daily active users most recently. Look at games like Ultima Online that are 25 years old. That's a game, that's a universe that literally had tens of millions of users playing it at certain points in time. You look at Fortnite, I think it's around 25 million daily active users now. That's twice the size of the entire state of New York. And what happens is these worlds that we exist in, today the back end, the tech infrastructure, everything that we built today is not built for being on the cloud when we think of interactive environments. So if I want to blow up a waterfall and reroute the water to somewhere else, that's not going to happen unless it's in a micro environment. Just now, the technology is coming out. So there's games like Everywhere, for example, which I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It's the people that literally founded Grand Theft Auto. That's the closest thing that I've ever seen to what actually could be a metaverse. There's things in that where you can go with your friends, watch a movie that's going to be coming out, and then pause the movie and then go play the game in the movie. So they're actually thinking about this stuff. And when you look at the adoption of Web3 technology, decentralization, things like that, these technologies, I think what happened in the first run, so one of our investors is Galaxy Ventures. They were one of the biggest investors in Web3 and this entire space. And they switched over to really focus on games, healthcare applications, things like that. And if you look at us, we measure people's psychology. That's something that should not be on the blockchain. Your psychological data, your psychological profile should not be exposed to everyone. You should own that. You should own the future of that, and you should be able to delete it whenever you want to. So one of the things we believe is privacy is power too. And so I think when we think through these applications of where things are, where they're going, it's inherently a social environment. When we think of assets too, because we work with game assets a lot. If you just try to take we work with Call of Duty. So if you take a game asset from their studio in Madison, Wisconsin, and try to put it in LA, it's a team of about, 30 to 40 artists, and it goes back and forth multiple times. So the idea that we're just gonna be tomorrow in a world where I can take my Burberry jetpack that was in Blankos, it's a mythical game, and I can take that into another game. The technology is very, very far away. So I think that's, from will this happen? Yes. Is it happening? Yes. Does the back-end infrastructure, the technology, the game developers, the people that build games are basically the most talented back-end people you'll ever meet in your life. And that's where the adoption curves come from, is just to make these worlds tick. The guy one of the original people who built Ultima Online, he has a game coming out, I think it's this year. And he's I've been waiting 15 years just to build this, and it's gonna feel like a metaverse. I've been waiting 15 years, and just now, the technology is starting to get there. So I think that's been one of our biggest limitations.
That's really interesting, because I feel like, from what you said, the Web3 folks have kind of built underlying technologies that will inspire game developers to build metaverses, right? Is that the right way of kind of?
I think it's the other way around.
What do you think is the other way around?
Oh yeah. It's if we look, historically, whether it's companies like NVIDIA, that came from gaming, Jurassic Park, that came from gaming. A lot of the technologies that we sit on today came from the world of gaming. And I think, there are, even the artifact guys, what they did with their clones and all that. And they're one of the few cases where, Nike acquired them, and you can actually forge an artifact shirt, and it's kind of a premium digital brand. But all of that came from gaming. I know that one of our other investors were kind of they're invested in us and them. And that's that inspiration, and for it to work, for it to really click and lock into place. So what a lot of the gaming world is looking at now is, how do we make it practical? So like, not everything should be an NFT, for example, if we're talking about NFTs. But like, hey, if there's a rare marshmallow skin from Fortnite that normally you'd have to sell on eBay, like maybe that should be an NFT. But then now, if I want to cross that in over to other games, like that's not there. So all that technology will get built mostly by game developers. If we look at Web3 games, like I'm not trying to badmouth anyone, but all those companies that raised lots of money and kind of went for Web3, or even like let's just talk about like Yuga Labs and Bored Apes, like it's very, very, very hard to build a universe, to build a game. And there's been world builders doing this for their whole life. And what's the challenge is some of these groups raised a lot of money, but they, a lot of the Web3 crowd didn't want to do it. They didn't want to talk to the people that build games. And what we're seeing right now, why none of these games are released, is because they're all failures. The back-end infrastructure is dead. It's gone. And then they have to go try to recover that capital. And what a lot of them are doing right now is reaching out to game companies and say, hey, can you help? And they're going like, I don't think so. Yeah. It would have been, but I think the hype cycle and what's there, it's that Warren Buffett quote, which is like, when the tides come up, everyone sees who's swimming naked. And the tide's out now. And so I think the Web3 companies that are still around are the ones where there's lots of value and there's something there that they're doing that's special. And I think that the next generation because there will be a hype cycle again. Yeah. And when that happens, I think we're going to start to see really stuff that's real, stuff that is applicable to everyone else.
I think that's a great point, because I think something we all can agree is, what's happened with this hype cycle is a lot of the kind of fluffiness is kind of being pushed out, right? Some of these companies that haven't been legitimate, we did hear of loads of NFT projects with rug pulls and taking people's money, and it's awful, right? So I think that's completely right. And I think, Tamid, coming back to you, on the issue of kind of challenges and sort of roadblocks we face to developing a metaverse that everyone wants, what kind of challenges do you see?
So I think it really just is an extension of what my colleagues mentioned there, about really, in my opinion, having some form of standardization for that back end. And I say that because, there's an argument to be made that, the metaverse is already in itself quite large. So one of the things that we did recently is that we looked at the number of third-party estimates for the market size, or total addressable market, TAM, for the metaverse. And it came to around $60 billion in 2022. Now, if you think about it for a moment, that's quite a large number, and obviously takes into account, a lot of your traditional kind of VR technologies. But the interesting thing for myself is going forward, it's expected on average to be around 340 billion, I think is the number we got to, according to third-party estimates, by 2027. And that equates to around, a compound annual growth rate of over a little over 40%. So I think really to get to such a high number when you already have such a high starting base is to have some form of standardization that makes people kind of want to use the technology more so than they're doing now. And there's a strong argument to be said, especially with the likes of gaming, for instance, that there's a lot of people already kind of in the metaverse.
Yeah, I think that's completely right. And back to you, Elizabeth. I think standardization is something that's really key in any industry, right? I think we saw that with Apple recently, and the change of their charging lead and port, right, to use USB-Cs. Like, how important is standardization in metaverse as well? So that's a standard across the board.
Well, incredibly important, and I'll do a quick shout out to the Metaverse Standards Forum. I see Neil sitting in the back there. If you have not joined the Metaverse Standards Forum, please get on board. We're a lot of organizations getting together in all areas and trying to create standards, across so that these technologies are interoperable. From a legal standpoint, the standards are also incredibly important. They're the challenges that we're faced with the future metaverse here, and a lot of technologies that are developing now, are that they're global. There aren't any borders or no nation-state borders around a lot of these technologies, or at least where they're used, where you could be located when you're in a virtual world. A lot of the traditional borders that our laws are based on kind of go away. And so what we need to come to is some kind of agreement internationally about how we're going to handle issues that come up, and a lot of international organizations are looking at these issues now, including policing organizations like Interpol or just basically like every major government, NGOs around the world, trying to figure out how our current laws fit into these digital environments. Some of them do actually transfer, because a lot of what we do in digital environments is similar to what we're doing in virtual environments, and so some things will transfer over. Sometimes the tracking and tracing and how identifiable people are in these environments. If we're then dealing with any kind of automation or AI agents in environments, we have to kind of look there as well, and see how our current laws can be either modified or how we can create new ones and standards just across internationally. So will that be an international treaty? Will it be something that we all kind of come to an agreement on? There's an interesting parallel with something like maritime law or something along those lines, where we have kind of agreements of how we will treat certain activities in certain areas. But these are conversations that are going on basically with every government around the world right now, trying to figure out, can we have some common agreement here? You probably have heard, even in this country and in Europe, everything that's going on right now around regulating AI, and the conversations are the same in the metaverse space. That there are conversations that are going on all over the place, and the trick will be getting all of these reports that are being generated from all of these meetings with very, very smart people into actual concrete regulation and standards that can be useful to all of us and useful as guidance to companies and industries developing in this space, because otherwise we run the risk of this technology is developing so quickly that we run the risk of doing kind of what we have done in the past, which is moving forward with innovation in sort of the excitement of it all, and then dealing with the consequences later. And unfortunately, in this space, as fast as things are developing, some of those consequences are difficult to deal with later. And some of what we're seeing right now with the training of AI models is a good example of that. But when we really start to infringe on people's privacy and have bigger concerns in this space as things move quickly, if we can take a step back and really develop standards from the technical standpoint and from the legal standpoint before we sort of rush forward, that would be for the best. And again, the big kind of challenge here is taking all of the big minds and all of the work that's happening in all of these meetings and committees around the world and getting it into a place where it is helpful and useful for us as global citizens, for companies developing these products. And so any efforts that can be made in those spaces, I think, are beneficial and will move us in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think we've seen across the board, like politically and obviously in areas like Middle East, say Singapore, Asia, etc., really the government's investing in metaverse technologies and how they're used, and from a legal standpoint as well. And so I think in Europe and the West, I think we're still yet to kind of see that, and to look at how the metaverse can be used, and from a legal standpoint and political standpoint, how actors are going to work to ensure it becomes a reality.
And just to add one point to that, when we're talking about the metaverse, we really have to have adaptable regulation as well. So in certain things in the past, we've been able to regulate and then say, these are some hard and fast rules that we're going to follow. And when tracking these technologies as well, we really have to have an open mind about what will develop in the future, because we honestly, you could not have really predicted Cambridge Analytica scandal when Facebook was, tracking data for ads, right? And we can't predict some of the outcomes that are going to happen now from some of the practices that are taking place right now. And so we need to keep an open mind about what and where we need to regulate going forward, and really keep an eye on it, as opposed to saying, okay, we've done that, we've made some general principles of law here, some general principles of standards, and now we can move on. It has to be a constant conversation as these technologies develop.
I agree. And finally, Fabio, from just a generalistic geographic point of view, where are you seeing kind of investment hotspots, and where do you see it going? I mentioned the Middle East. That's one that's particularly prevalent at the moment, but where else?
Very quickly, I enjoyed the work you guys doing. I think it's good to have those initiatives. I will also refer you to the World Economic Forum initiative for the metaverse very quickly before I answer your question. Literally called Defining and Building the Metaverse, where we try to bring, or we are bringing people from academia, from private sector, and public sector to try and harmonize and also work on the issues of inclusion and ethics. So there are lots of top-down initiatives which are very good. In terms of geography, so it's a very good point. The work we're doing, for example, with the web that I just mentioned, is quite Western-centric, I must say. But in terms of the metaverse, I mean, we saw during the COVID, during the pandemic. Just to go back to gaming, for example, some demographics in the Philippines or Venezuela even were using gaming to actually earn some cash, and because nobody could work and everybody was staying home. That's a use case. That's a demographic that.
Maybe to add to that, it's still about 50% of people that play NFT games are from the Philippines.
Philippines, yeah.
Just the Philippines. So that kind of shows how far it is away from a broader reality.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't generalize and you can't have a general approach, because some demographics, whether they're gamers or crypto guys, and sometimes those demographics, those communities cross-pollinate because they are at the forefront of the technological advancements and so on. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes gamers just want to play games. So the metaverse in some geographies means more crypto gaming and some usage of some tokens. In some other countries, it means more meta-type experiences, brand-type experiences, or trying to engage or monetize communities, which is a nice word for saying clients, customers, basically sometimes. So it's not an easy question. As an independent operator, we're trying to see where the mass adoption is coming from, of course. Will it be from a commercial, perspective with gaming or education, or from an industrial enterprise metaverse, which was discussed this morning, which I thought was a good point.
I think it's like Steve Jobs said, when you focus on the technology, he's never seen a product work that's done that. Never. And I think that's the failure of all the venture capital money that went into the first round. All of it was technology focused. And so we have a couple Web3 investors that were in Solston. And we never said, we're not a Web3 company. We don't care about that. We only care about understanding people and making the internet a better place. And so obviously there's that intersection of community and people. And I think, where we are still seeing some because we work with Web3 game companies. We work with Axie Infinity. We understand the psychology of that whole space. And I think where you're now seeing applications like in healthcare and outside, or even real estate, that's interesting to sell your house as an NFT, for example. There's something to that. But I think those are where the hot spots will happen, are where people are using actual utilitarian applications that serve human needs. And I do think there will be some, but it's so dead right now. It's so dead. If you are in that space, I think what a lot of those companies that we got to work with, and there are a lot of really smart people, they're pivoting to go it's like the company that made Slack. They were a game company. Hey, we built this really useful tool for talking to each other. Yeah. That's what a lot's happening. We have all this cool tech, but who do we make it useful for? And so I think that's where the next focus from investment will be.
I think that's right, and I think a nice fruit.
I want to add a couple of words about geography of metaverse. Yeah. So what we do, it's metaverse and fashion. Yeah. So look at fashion first, because it's physical, it's easier, yeah, for general people. So India, China, Japan, South Korea, Dubai, and East, yeah, is playing more and more important role in fashion. Yeah. And fashion is dream. Fashion isn't just pants and T-shirts. Yeah. We do pay 600% of real cost of things because of the dream. So because we buy status, we buy culture, and so on. The same story with the metaverse. And we see statistics. Yeah? So in our case, metaverse and fashion is India, China, Japan, as I said, and from tech side as well, India is one of the main countries now, yeah, because Indian developers, and they have money, investors, so it's growing quite quickly, yeah. And last but not least, from the creativity perspective, so Pakistan people, Nigeria people, are more interesting, some not just sometimes, almost always more interesting than people from London. Maybe. So I've been to fashion shows for the last 20 years in London or Paris. So for me, it's just so boring to find something, just digital copies of what they already have done in London after Alexander McQueen or like any other great designers. Yeah. Now what you can see in metaverse is just a copies. Yeah. As you said, Burberry backpack, we respect it. Yeah. But where is something totally new, yeah, for metaverse to be the reason why I should go there? And people from Pakistan and Nigeria, they do. I will send you links. Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah.
I think that's like with kind of what everyone's talking about with like interoperability in different countries. Like when Artifact did their crypto kicks, and they pissed off most of their community because a lot of their community is Japanese, but they were made with lithium-ion batteries, so they couldn't ship them to Japan. So all these people now own these digital assets, which you could turn into real fashion. And you guys probably know the story behind that. Like, they built it, Nike had the patents, they talked, Nike bought Artifact. And now, so Nike enabled those things to exist in real life. And I think that's one of the few examples of a big brand at scale, bringing something from, this Web3 world into reality. But then it bombed and people lost interest because you excluded half your community because they didn't do the math that, hey, the technology we have, we actually can't get it to the customer on the other side of the world.
Yeah, I think
that's a big problem.
Yeah, and I think there's a great through line to everything you guys have said, which is the metaverse needs to be human-centric at the end of the day, doesn't it? It needs to be human-orientated. All the emerging technologies that we are using has to be really put the human first at the end of the day.
When we first started working with some of these Web3 games, they'd be like, yeah, we have 10 million wallets or something like that. And then, because our business model works off of DAU, and it also works daily active users. It also works off of engagement too. And you'd never seen less people in something or less people engaging than these experiences. And then when you kind of look at how many people have wallets, NFL Rivals, super cool game. It's like Web3 Lite. We built that game with Mythical. So we just looked at people who didn't necessarily have a wallet, but had heard of Coinbase. And I think that's where the intersection exists today, is how do we bridge to the mass market so people that are familiar with some of this stuff, and actually the top 10 brands that people that have heard of Web3 things but don't have a wallet, the NFL is in the top 5 of those. So that's why NFL Rivals was made, which is the #1 sports game right now. And you can buy digital assets, but it's like Web 2.5. It's not Web 3. So I think that's where the metaverse is now.
Yeah.
What we're going to start to see are experiences like that, and then that's going to help us get to mass adoption.
I think that's a great ending point and a fantastic segue. So thank you for our panelists for joining. Please give them a round of applause.
Thank you.